Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Dr. Aisha Ghias. I'm working as Associate Professor of Dermatology at King Edward Medical University. And पहले की तरह आज भी हम dermoscopy के ऊपर एक presentation लेकर आए हैं. And the idea is to make PGs as well as dermatologists aware of the basic terminology, basic methods and dermatoscopy practices, and so that we should be able and we should be more confident in diagnosing skin lesions. And trust me, with the help of this device, you can really isolate benign from those of concerning lesions in the matter of a blink. And this is so very important. It has got good sensitivity and specificity. And sometimes not only do we really isolate benign from malignant cases, but we are in ourselves very much sure that whatever diagnosis I'm working on is actually going to be likely one or a non-likely diagnosis. And sometimes it's so very much useful in the cases of alopecias that you instantly know whether I'm dealing with alopecia areata or androgenic alopecia or telogen effluvium, which we do not know apparently just on the clinical examination sometimes. So today, this is going to be the chapter 3 of dermoscopy. And in chapter 3, as I promised earlier, we'll be discussing about the chaos and clues method. This is one of the dermoscopic methods in diagnosing skin lesions. And जैसे हमने पहले पिछली 2 presentations में किया था, और अगर किसी ने शुरू से dermoscopy learn करना start करना है out of everyone whosoever is attending this lecture, तो उनके लिए आई वुड सजेस्ट कि आप पहले वाले 2 लेक्चर्स पहले सुन लें, बिकॉज बेसिक टर्मिनोलॉजी एंड बेसिक नॉमेनक्लेचर लीजन्स वो हमने पहले वाले 2 प्रेजेंटेशंस में कवर किए. And this lecture is going to be about this, specifically about chaos and clues method, which is one of the methods of dermoscopic skin lesions diagnosis. So working towards the first slide, this is chaos and clues method. Remember, we studied about revised pattern analysis, and in revised pattern analysis, we studied patterns and colors and clues. So if we combine patterns and colors, we can call them chaos. And then clues, obviously, we do have some clues in chaos and clues method. So if we find a lesion is chaotic, it is showing chaos, plus we find some of the clues or one of the clues, we say that fine, this lesion is concerning and we need really to cut it out. Now, this chaos and clues method does not necessarily isolate BCC or SCC or melanoma. It does not say that the lesion is specifically belonging to this diagnosis. But it surely tells us that the lesion is concerning. It is likely to be malignant. So we really need to cut it out. We need to go for biopsy. So this is the importance of chaos and clues method. It has got a very good sensitivity, around 90%, and the specificity is around 65 to 70%. So revised pattern analysis में जैसे हमने patterns और colors पढ़े थे, if we consider patterns and colors like very, in the speed of a blink, and you don't really have to analyze them like we did in the revised pattern analysis. We had to analyze the images and we had to put them in language, that it's lines, reticular, or it's whole, or it's network, or it's dots and clots. You don't really have to put the terminology into language, but just consider in your mind whether the pattern under question is symmetrical or non-symmetrical, whether the colors are symmetrical or non-symmetrical, and on the basis of symmetry, then you see if the lesion is chaotic or non-chaotic. So we'll first define chaos and then we'll see the clues. This will make the chaos and clues method for us. Now, chaos, as I said, can be studied in the speed of a blink. You can scan for chaos. You don't have to spend time to see for chaos. It doesn't take much. The presence or absence of chaos can usually be assessed at the speed of a blink. If in doubt, then you should assume that there is chaos. I mean, if you are really taking time and you don't know whether the lesion is chaotic, so assume it's chaotic. Okay. Now, the clues. As you can see, there are 9 clues in the middle of the slide written in red. Any one clue present means that the lesion is concerning. Now, coming on to the left-hand side of the slide, you see if the lesion is pigmented, you can employ this method for diagnosis. It is meant for the pigmented lesions. If the lesion is non-pigmented, probably this is not a good method to use. Okay. So once you have a pigmented lesion, you see whether chaos is present or not. If chaos is not present, fine, you don't really need to intervene. But if chaos is present, then you see if clues are present or not. And what clues are you looking for? You are looking for these 9 clues. We are going to study them one by one. If any one of these clues is present, you are obviously going for biopsy, unless in the presence of chaos and clues, you find that the diagnosis of SK is unequivocal. That means, despite the presence of chaos and clues, sometimes some lesions of SK show chaos in one of the clues, but it's your clinical sense and experience that tells you that the diagnosis of seborrheic keratosis is unequivocal over here. Then you can maybe bypass biopsy, but otherwise do not. And there are certain exceptions to this no intervention. See, there's an asterisk over here. So when you really do not intervene, there are certain exceptions when even if you do not have chaos or clues, you are supposed to intervene. What are those exceptions? These exceptions are changing lesion on adults. If some adults come to you with some changing lesion on the face or elsewhere, it's changing in size, in colors, if it's changing in depth in the third dimension, then you are obviously supposed to intervene, no matter if you see chaos or clues. Secondly, nodular or small lesions with any clue. कोई भी clue हो जाए और अगर nodular या small lesion होगा तो आपने उसको कर. Nodular means that the activity is there, that the proliferation is there, so you should take it out. And thirdly, head and neck pigmented circles और dermatoscopic gray. तो अगर आपको ये नजर आ जाए, although the dermatoscopic gray, even if it's there very symmetrical, doesn't show any chaos, and you don't find any clue other than the dermatoscopic gray, but in head and neck lesion, it's very important. It's a photoexposed area. It's an area where the malignant lesions come very often, so you really need to cut them out. And in the acral areas, parallel ridge pattern. So PRP, parallel ridge pattern, which we really study in the last slides of today's lecture. If PRP or platelet rich pattern is there anywhere on the palms and soles, you are going to cut it out. So this was a summary of the chaos and clues method which you are going to use, because the slide seems a little bit cumbersome. So really you don't need to worry about. I have made it simple for you that if in a pigmented skin lesion, if you're considering that if I really need to go for biopsy or not, you should employ this method in mind. Just see for chaos. If it's there, search for clues. If the chaos is not there, fine, you're relaxed. Okay. So now going further, these are the 9 clues which I have simplified for you. And the first is gray or blue structures. Then is eccentric structureless area. I'm going to read them out for you, and then one by one we are going to see them in detail. Third is thick lines reticular, then dots peripheral, lines radial or pseudopod segmental, lines white, lines parallel ridges on the palms and soles, polymorphous vessels, and polycones. Now, the most specific clues are seen on the top. These three are most specific clues. Like 90% of the melanomas you're going to diagnose. You're going to diagnose on the basis of these 3 clues, and the rest of the clues are written down there. Okay, so I have made a mnemonic of them just to memorize these 9 clues, because if you do not memorize, how are you going to look for them? So the mnemonic is GET, G-E-T, GET, and then D se hai ji dermoscope, get dermoscope. L, there are 3 L's, so 3 points for your learning. Why are you going to get dermoscope? Because you want to learn, so 3 points for your learning and 2 points for your passion. Some people do have a passion of viewing dermoscopy in clinical practice because they do not want to be lagged behind and they want to keep pace with the world. So it's a passion that they use dermoscopy not only just to take out benign and malignant lesions separately, but as a part of their practice, to make them more astound clinicians, they do have a passion. So get dermoscope, 3 for learning, 2 for passion. So that's the mnemonic which I use and which you may use. And if you want to use any other mnemonic, you want to make any other mnemonic to memorize these 9 clues, that's up to you. Okay, so coming on to the first clue, which is gray or blue structures. Now let's see in detail what are these gray and blue structures. If you see on the right hand side, this is the lesion in dermoscopy, and in dermoscopy we saw these blue areas, gray or blue areas. So the gray or blue on dermoscopy shows that there are melanocytes or melanophages or the free melanin down there in the dermis. Because in the previous lectures we already have learned about why does the blue seems blue, why is the brown looking brown, ऐसे colors हमें dermoscopy में क्यों नजर आते हैं और इनकी क्या interpretation है, ये हम already study कर चुके हैं. तो मैं आपको दोबारा से बता दूं कि blue color denotes that the melanin, free melanin or the melanocytes are there down in the dermis. They are not supposed to be there. Once they're there, so it raises the suspicion for a lesion to be malignant. So this is, there are so many other clues as well, but at the moment we are concentrating on dermoscopic gray or blue. So let's concentrate on these colors, the grays and blues. And if you see on the left-hand side, the upper darker area is the epidermis, but down there, there are so many nests of melanocytes. Some of the melanocytes do carry pigment and the others do not. So the pigment-carrying melanocytes and the nests of melanocytes do make this gray or blue on dermoscopy, and that's the reason we find these colors on dermoscopy. Okay, so this was the histological representation of this gray or blue on dermoscopy. Hope you understand better. Another blue on dermoscopy, this is in the form of a big clot. It's not a dot because dot is a small, less discernible thing on dermoscopy. It's a little bit bigger, so we call it a clot. This is a big blue clot in the dermoscopic picture of a skin lesion. You do see so many other things, for example, vessels, and a little bit of the structureless areas and these gray things also. But of note here is this blue clot, and this is there because of the pigment down there in the dermis. Now the pigment is not necessarily carried by the melanocytes. Now, it's very important concept. I would like to have your attention for a while that the gray or blue on dermoscopy does not necessarily mean atypical melanocytes. It can help you to diagnose BCC as well, which is a keratinocytic malignancy. Like over here, this blue is a blue clot of BCC. And what does it denote? It denotes atypical keratinocytes that have gone down into the dermis during proliferation, and they have acquired pigment in them. It's the pigment that they have carried down into the dermis that have given the blue color. And since it's not symmetrical, it's not present elsewhere, it's just a single blue clot, it qualifies for diagnosis of BCC. And there are obviously certain other features, diagnostic features of BCC in this slide. So I hope you understand that the dermoscopic gray or blue does not necessarily mean melanoma. It also denotes BCC as well. So the second feature is eccentric structureless area. Eccentric, not centric, because if it's there in the center, the structureless area, you might consider the, yes, nevi. Okay. So eccentric structureless area means that there is something on the slide, the color of which is not that of a skin color. If it's skin color, we do not say it's the eccentric structureless area. And for the structureless area to be diagnosed, you should have structures elsewhere, like over here. These are the brown structures in the slide. But this thing is a skin color, so इसको हम disregard करेंगे. Skin color को आपने नहीं लेना. the color which is lighter than that of the skin color is taken into consideration, like over here and over here. ये whiter है, थोड़ा सा lighter in color than that of the skin. So this is a eccentric structureless area. You see structureless areas in nevi as well, but they are symmetrical. They might be present whole around the whole periphery of the lesion, or they may be in the center of the nevi. But over here, eccentric structureless area with a little bit of peppering inside, sorry, excuse me. So what is a peppering? Peppering is this dot-like structures, dot-like gray structures. If you're following this white cursor, the dot-like structures in the whitish background is called peppering. And this is very much diagnostic. This is very much significant for malignant lesions. So what does this denote actually? Histologically, the eccentric structureless area denotes regression and fibrosis. And regression and fibrosis, along with the presence of structures elsewhere, denotes malignancies. It's a malignant process denote. So you really need to take biopsies for that. Okay, so going to the third clue, it's thick lines reticular. Thick lines reticular. So where did we study the reticular lines? We studied reticular lines in the diagnosis of nevi as well as in the diagnosis of melanoma. But there, when we studied normal reticular network of the skin, which is pretty much there in your skin and in my skin, everyone's skin, because of the presence of junctional activity of melanocytes and the melanin there in the melanocytes, it's pretty much there in our skin as well. But the lines are thinner. The lines are thinner than the circles they enclose. But in this chaos enclose method, once you see thicker lines thicker than the circles they are making, this qualifies for the malignant lesions. Like over here, if you can see, this is the dermoscopic picture of a lesion. As you can see, there are circles, the bigger, the lines are thinner. But over here on the bottom and the bottom left, you see that the lines have become very much thicker and the circles they are enclosing are now becoming smaller and smaller. So this is an atypical area. Even when you see a combination of thin lines and thick lines, this also makes this also makes a suspicion. And the thick lines reticular. Thick lines reticular means that the network is atypical network. So atypical network obviously goes for melanoma. Fourth clue is dots peripheral. You see dots in nevi as well, but these dots might be distributed throughout the periphery of the lesion or they may be in the center of the lesion. But if the dots are there peripheral, not symmetrical, obviously, the lesion is chaotic and it shows you a basic clue. So you really biopsy that lesion. For example, as you can see on the right-hand side of this picture, this is a dermoscopic image of a skin lesion. And other than having this dermoscopic gray and blue, because we studied the same lesion for the first clue, which was dermoscopic gray and blue, other than having this gray and blue thing, okay. So you may see these dots, eccentric dots, okay. So these dots are there in the periphery. They are not in the center. They are not even distributed throughout the periphery. So they are significant. What do they denote? The color is brown. So that means that the activity is junctional. It's not in the dermis, deep in the dermis. It's junctional. Now let's see it in the histopathology slide. As you can see over here, that the junctional activity of melanocytes is there and they are huge proliferations of the nests of melanocytes over here. Now, this whole bunch of melanocytic nests would appear as a dot on dermoscopy. See, even these ones, the big nests will appear as small dots and the huge nests would appear as big dots on dermoscopy when you see the lesion from the top with your scope. There's a little bit of inflammatory reaction over here as well. Fibrosis is also going on. So this is a typical picture of melanoma. And you can clearly appreciate how these proliferations of melanocytes, atypical melanocytes, are giving this appearance of dots, peripheral dots. Okay. So next slide is lines radial or pseudopod segmental. This is the next clue. Lines radial or pseudopods segmental. Radial lines are usually seen in malignancies. Which malignancies? Melanomas as well as BCC. Now, the radial lines in melanomas, they denote radial proliferation of atypical melanocytes. And in BCC, when we see radial lines, they are usually converging towards the same line. I mean, they do have a source or they do converge somewhere. But in melanoma, they are not converging. They do not make any leaves. They do not make any maple leaf-like pattern, which is pretty much there in BCCs. So let's see the radial lines. These are radial lines that are converging towards the same center. And similarly, these are the thick radial lines that are being converged. Similarly, over here and here and here. And if you see the same lesion histologically, you see that these were actually the atypical proliferations of keratinocytes that went into the dermis, making various patterns. And this is the radial proliferation of the atypical cells that gives rise to these radial lines. So this was a case of BCC. Yes. Radial lines are also seen in melanomas. This is a short presentation concentrating only on the clues of chaos and clues method, but I'll surely be uploading a detailed presentation of the lesions जिसमें हम chaos and clues method को deploy करेंगे, and that would be a little bigger. वो मैंने अभी थोड़ा मुझे shorter presentation चाहिए थी, so I just focused on 1 or 2 pictures for one clue. और उसमें हम थोड़ा ज्यादा पिक्चर्स को इंक्लूड करेंगे ताकि आपको ज्यादा अंडरस्टैंडिंग डेवलप हो, और उसमें हम एक एक क्लू के लिए 2-2, 3-3 पिक्चर्स करेंगे, जिसमें एक क्लिनिकल पिक्चर होगी, उसी की डर्मोस्कोपिक पिक्चर होगी और उसी की हिस्टोलॉजिकल पिक्चर होगी मोस्टली. सो दिस इज माय प्लान chaos एंड क्लूज मेथड को फर्दर एलैबोरेट करने के लिए. बट चूंकि बहुत ज्यादा लंबी प्रेजेंटेशन और बहुत कंबरसम किस्म की एक्सप्लेनेशंस जो हैं, दे आर रियली बोर in the very start of your dermoscopic learning, and I do not want that you should run away from dermoscopy. एंड आप कहो कि भाई ये तो बहुत ही कोई फजूल किस्म की चीज है, बहुत मुश्किल है, हमें समझ ही नहीं आएगी. सो दिस प्रेजेंटेशन इज काइंड ऑफ अ सिंपलर वन ऑन chaos एंड क्लूज. पहले आप इसको समझ लें, इसको देख लें, इसके क्लूज को याद कर लें, थोड़ा सा अंडरस्टैंडिंग डेवलप कर लें, एंड देन मे बी इन द फ्यूचर प्रेजेंटेशंस हम एक अच्छी सी एलैबोरेटेड भी chaos एंड क्लूज मेथड के ऊपर प्रेजेंटेशन अपलोड करेंगे. So next clue is going to be lines white. Anything which is lighter in color than the surrounding skin is called white in dermoscopy. So as you can see, these lines are not necessarily white, but they are obviously lighter than the surrounding skin. So these are called lines white or streaks, white shiny lines or streaks. And these are only visible with polarized dermoscopy, and they actually sometimes make polygons, like in the bottom of this picture they are making polygons which are the different angles and shapes of white lines that enclose some spaces, making the polygonal structures are called polygons. They may be complete or incomplete, like in the upper part of the picture these are incomplete polygons, so we call them so we call them white streaks over here, and we may call these structures which they enclose as polygons down there. So why are these made? These are made up of the altered collagen, which is formed as a result of the malignant process over there. So the birefringence properties, the radiant, the color reflectance properties of the collagens are altered. That is formed later in the process of healing, and proliferation and healing and trauma going side by side in one case of malignancy. So then you see these white lines or white streaks because of these altered properties of the collagen that is made over there. Okay, so this was the white lines. It's a clue to malignancy, and you really need to cut this lesion out wherever you see these white lines on dermoscopy, on polarized dermoscopy. So the next clue is lines parallel ridges, in the form of ridges, and these are obviously seen on the palms and soles, because the palms and soles skin is already thrown into folds and ridges. You see, the dermatoglyphics, these are there because of the presence of ridges. So in the ridges, if you see lines parallel, this makes the lesion concerning. Normally, the pigment is concentrated there in the furrows, and the ridges are practically not having any color. They are having the openings of the acrine ducts. This is there in the palms and soles normally. Ridge is thicker than the furrow. Furrow is just in the form of a line, and the ridges are thicker. They are in between the lines. These are ridges having these openings of acrine ducts. Okay, so if the pigment is there in the furrows, it's okay, it's fine, it's normal, it's not concerning. But once it's there in the ridges, it's concerning. As for example, this is benign, and on the right hand side is a malignant case. The furrows are not having any color, but the ridges are having the colors. So you can see the thicker ridges, the thicker brown pigment making ridges. And in between these thick pigmented lines, there is no color. So these are the furrows, and the thicker pigment is there in the ridges. So this is PRP, or parallel ridge pattern. It's diagnostic for acral melanoma. So you obviously are going to take biopsy. Okay, second last clue is a polymorphous vessels. Polymorphous means that the vessels of different morphology. So vessels of different morphology usually aren't supposed to be there in benign lesions. Once they're there, so you really consider malignant process going on. As for example, over here, you see dots. Larger dots are because of the glomerular vessels. Then you see these coma or hooped vessels. You also see the linear vessels. You see the branching vessels. And you see the clumping of the vessels. The glomerular again. So there are so many types of vessels over here in the same lesion, single lesion. So this is diagnostic of malignancy. This is a case of amelanotic melanoma showing vessels. By the way, in coming presentations, we are also going to discuss the diagnosis of non-pigmented lesions. It wasn't very much important in the skin of color like in art, but once you are learning dermoscopy, you're learning it for the whole range of skin colors, not only for your own skin color. Because if you come across some patient with albinism, or you come across some European race, or for that matter, you go somewhere else in the world and you say, I have just learned dermoscopy on the skin of color, so that doesn't make a good impression. If you learn dermoscopy, you should learn it on all the skin colors, and the interpretations are really different. So first of all, we should learn dermoscopy in the skin of color, ताकि हमें colors नजर आए, हम structures को पहचान सकें, patterns को पहचान सकें, और जब हमें ये सारी चीजें आ जाएं, तो obviously we should also learn dermoscopy in wider races. So this was a case of malignancy with polymorphous vessels. Last clue is a polygon. जैसे मैंने पहले आपको बताया था white lines में, lines white. तो जैसे हम ये जो लोग जिसे डिस्क्राइब करते हैं ना, जब डेमोस्कोपिक टर्म्स को, डेमोस्कोपिक नॉमेनक्लेचर को, तो इसमें सबसे पहले ये नहीं कहते कि रेडियल लाइंस और व्हाइट लाइंस. अगर आप देख सकते हो यहाँ पे जो 3 पॉइंट्स है हमारे एल के, उसमें लाइंस पहले लिखा गया है. सो बेसिक जो चीज है, जो बेसिक पैटर्न है, जो बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर है, बिकॉज देयर वर 5 बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर्स इन डर्मोस्कोपी जो हमने रिवाइज्ड पैटर्न एनालिसिस में भी पढ़ा, और बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर्स इन डर्मोस्कोपी में मैंने आपको बताया. If I can revise them for you, these were dots, clots, circles, lines. Okay, so ये वाली सारी चीजें थी. तो इनमें से जो बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर होती है उसको ये पहले लिखते हैं लाइंस, और उसके बाद उसकी फर्दर जो स्पेसिफिकेशन है लाइन की, कि वो लाइन है कैसी, वो रेडियल है या वाइट है या पैरेलल रिजेस की फॉर्म में, देन वो ये लिखते हैं. इसी तरीके से डेमोस्कोपिक नॉमेनक्लेचर चलता है. सो आप भी ऐसे ही लिखेंगे, लाइंस रेडियल, लाइंस वाइट, लाइंस पैरेलल. ओके, सो द लास्ट क्लू इज अ पॉलीगॉन. व्हाट्स अ पॉलीगॉन? सो polygons are complete or incomplete. They are bounded by straight lines और स्ट्रेट पिगमेंट इंटरफेस. यानी पिगमेंट इंटरफेस का मतलब है कि एक तरफ लाइट पिगमेंट है, एक तरफ डार्क पिगमेंट है, और उस वजह से वो कुछ शेप्स बना रहे हैं. एंड द शेप्स माइट बी कंप्लीट और इनकम्प्लीट, बट these lines which are made by actual pigmented lines or the interface of different pigments, they are meeting an angle with each other. and they are larger than the holes caused by individual follicles. Okay, as you can see on the right upper side, यहाँ पे incomplete polygons बन रही हैं because of the presence of these lines, grayish lines. These lines are meeting each other at an angle and they are making up these shapes in between, encircled by these lines. These are incomplete polygons. Similarly, अगर आप यहाँ देखते हैं तो ये एक कुछ structures बन रही हैं. यहाँ पे incomplete है, but this one is complete. Even this one is complete. और ये क्यों बन रही हैं? Because of the presence of these lines, pigmented lines, which are meeting each other at angles. और ये व्हाइट लाइन से भी बन जाती है, जैसे हमने पहले आपको पॉलीगॉन्स दिखाई. एंड ओवर हियर दिस इज बिकॉज ऑफ द इंटरफेस ऑफ द कलर्स. यहाँ पे लाइटर कलर है, यहाँ पे डार्कर कलर है, एंड द इंटरफेस इज क्रिएटिंग अप a boundary, and these boundaries are meeting up each other at right angles, at different angles, not only the right angles but different other angles, and making up the shapes. These shapes are of different टाइप्स. आई मीन ये कोई क्लासिकल ट्रायंगुलर या क्वाड्रेंगुलर नहीं है, हेक्सागोनल भी हो सकती है, पेंटागोनल भी हो सकती है, और कंप्लीट भी हो सकती है, इनकम्प्लीट भी हो सकती है. सो दीज आर पॉलीगॉन्स, एंड पॉलीगॉन्स आर डायग्नोस्टिक फॉर मैलिग्नेंसी. सो we have studied all the clues for malignancy as described by chaos and clues method. So these were 9 clues, and in order to summarize them, मैंने इनके लिए आपको निमोनिक बताया था. This was get dermatoscope, 3 for learning, 2 for passion. So ये सारे क्लूज हैं, इनको 1 by 1 हमने देख लिया है, एक एक पिक्चर में, डर्मोस्कोपिक पिक्चर में, हिस्टोलॉजिकल पिक्चर में, और इंशाल्लाह हम इसको डिटेल से भी अपलोड करेंगे वेरी सून, जिसमें आपको मजीद एलेबोरेशन के साथ ये बताऊंगी. बट मैं पहले यही एडवाइस करूंगी कि आप पहले इस प्रेजेंटेशन को ही समझें, थोड़ा सा इसको इंटरनलाइज करें अपने अंदर, और फिर हम इसको एलेबोरेटेड भी पढ़ेंगे. सो आई होप टुडेज प्रेजेंटेशन वाज हेल्पफुल, and you should actually practice it in every day in order to make it a part of your clinical acumen. क्योंकि फायदा तभी होगा जब आप रूटीन में करेंगे, अदरवाइज कोई फायदा नहीं होगा डर्मोस्कोपी सीखने का. मुझे भी पहला 1-1.5 साल कोई फायदा नहीं हुआ. मैंने सर्टिफिकेशन तो ले ली थी, बट देन जब मैंने देखा कि मैं इसको प्रैक्टिकली कर ही नहीं रही, तो देन देयर इज नो फन बिकॉज इट इज सो मच वोलेटाइल, इट गेट्स आउट ऑफ योर हेड इमीडिएटली. तो फिर देन व्हेन आई स्टार्टेड प्रैक्टिसिंग इट, तो जब मैं स्कोप रखती थी तो मुझे पता तो था कि समथिंग इज देयर, बट व्हाट्स देयर वो मुझे पता ही नहीं था, याद सब भूल गया था. देन अगेन सारा कुछ खोल के पढ़ा और सीखा, एंड दिस इज व्हाट हैपेंड टू मी. और आई डोंट वांट कि ये आप लोगों के साथ किसी के साथ भी हो. तो आप जैसे जैसे जो चीज पढ़ते हैं उसको देखना शुरू करें, एंड बिलीव मी, वंस यू हैव मेड अप योर माइंड कि मैंने डर्मोस्कोपिक सीखनी है, तो आपको काफी सारी चीजें मिलने लग जाती हैं, दिखने लग जाती हैं, बिकॉज आईज डू नॉट नो व्हाट द माइंड डजंट नो. तो वो आपको ना नजर आने लग जाती हैं इन योर डेली लाइफ. सो आप ये लेक्चर के साथ तो सिर्फ 5% ही आपकी लर्निंग हो पाएगी, लेकिन अगर आप इसको घर जाके दोबारा से इसको पढ़ेंगे, आप इसको म्यूट करके पूरी प्रेजेंटेशन को जस्ट गो थ्रू द पिक्चर्स एंड लर्न ऑल बाय योरसेल्फ, रीड इट आउट ऑल बाय योरसेल्फ, देन मे बी कि आप 10% लर्निंग पे पहुंच जाएंगे. उसके बाद ऑडियो विजुअल अगर आप खोल के दोबारा से इसको देखते हो 20%, आप इसको डेमोन्स्ट्रेट कर देते हो एक दफा किसी को, मे बी 30%, किसी डिस्कशन ग्रुप में चले जाते हैं अलॉन्ग विद योर फ्रेंड्स एंड कोलीग्स, और वहां पे 2-3 लोग ये प्रेजेंटेशन या क्योस एंड क्लूज मेथड किसी भी और सोर्स से आप पढ़ते हैं, देन यू डिस्कस इट विद ईच अदर, तो यू विल बी at 50% of the learning pyramid. और अगर आप इसको प्रैक्टिस कर लेते हैं विद द स्कोप इन योर हैंड एंड यू एक्चुअली सी फॉर chaos एंड फाइंड द क्लूज, आप 75% इसको लर्न कर लेंगे. और जैसे कि मैंने भी पूरा लर्न नहीं किया, इफ आई एम टीचिंग इट मीन्स दैट आई हैव लर्नड ओनली 90%, 10% इज स्टिल रिमेनिंग. सो ये पैसिव टीचिंग मेथड्स होते हैं जिसमें लेक्चर, रीडिंग, ऑडियो विजुअल, डेमोन्स्ट्रेशन वगैरह होती है, और जो पार्टिसिपेटरी टीचिंग मेथड है वो ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है, जिसमें डिस्कशन, प्रैक्टिस बाय डूइंग एंड टीचिंग अदर्स आता है. सो आई वुड लाइक यू पीपल टू include this dermatoscopy in your clinical practice daily basis पे, और आप अपनी अपनी स्कोप खरीद लें, इसका बहुत ज्यादा फायदा होगा. This presentation is going to end from my side today, and inshallah very soon I'll be uploading another presentation on dermoscopy. Should be a very practical one, would be a very practical one. और अगर आपको इस presentation में you have any question or query, just let me know in the comment box, and all the comments come directly to me, and inshallah I'll be replying.